Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Season 1, Season Z of Zebra Reads. This is Episode 3. If you do not know what Zebra Reads is or about, I have the About page linked so that you can take a look at that video. Today we are going to be talking about The Orphan Master by Jean Zimmerman. And that is better. And so it's a story about early Manhattan in New York. So we'll be talking about Zimmerman and this book today. So Jean Zimmerman is a contemporary U.S. author. So she was born in 1957. She's a really interesting woman from what I can find of her. There's not tons out there on her. She seems to be an arborist. So she has a website that is dedicated to trees, which the website is called the Blog Cabin, which I thought was very, very clever. So her and her husband, Gil, who is apparently also a writer, seem to be able to spend their days in this really super cute little log cabin, and they do all of their writing sitting together in their slippers, which is just adorable. And so really, I mean, she seems to be the person that I wanted to be when I grew up. And I didn't get there, but she seems to have, and I absolutely love it. So The Orphan Master was published in 2012. It was her first fiction book. She's followed, I think, with a couple of others, at least one more, but she got her start writing in nonfiction books, and her interest is on the early colonial period of New York. In the U.S. And her focus is on the role of women in that historical context. So one of her nonfiction books is called, The Women of the House, How a Colonial She Merchant Built a Mansion, a Fortune, and a Dynasty. So there's this sort of colonial period and women, and this is all really evident in The Orphan Master too. So you can see that that's her interest and her passion. What the book is about. So the back of the book says it's a love story. I thought it was more mystery than love story. The setting is in early colonial New York, which apparently then was called New Amsterdam, which I was not aware of. And the plot revolves around a series of disappearances of children, and all of the children were orphans. So the back of the book kind of implies that the main protagonist, so there's this woman, Blandine Vancouvering, and then Edward Drummond, and they help to solve these murders, but that's, I don't know if that's actually how that really worked. The disappearances of the orphans lead to sort of this fear in New Amsterdam of the Whittaker, which is a Native American-based boogeyman, and he eats human flesh. And so there's this really irrational surge of information going through the community, which is causing a whole lot of confusion, and it's preventing people from being able to actually discover the true identity of the child abductor, because they're focused on this sort of scary story. But in the end, it's resolved and it gets all figured out, but there's a lot of tragedy in this book and quite a lot of bloodshed too. My take on this book This is totally a book I would have picked up to read. I judge books by their covers. This is like a perfect cover for me. I would love this book. The back of the book sounds right up my alley. I think this colonial period in the US and in Europe in that 1600s is really a fascinating time. I love reading about it. So I totally would have picked this book up to read it. But I see in this sort of the same problem that I've seen in other novels that have some sort of a historical setting or a place or a type of interest, in that it's not super clear that if this is supposed to be a story of a mystery and it's just taking place in the backdrop of this Dutch colony, or if it's intended to be like this historical description of Dutch colony life, but just placed in the placed in with this rash of orphan killings as a MacGuffin, right? So it's sort of like, is this supposed to be about the mystery love story, or is this supposed to be about the Dutch colonies and that historical, cultural, social description? And I actually preferred it as the latter. I loved the descriptions and the depictions of the Dutch colonists themselves and the culture in the 1600s in America. But I was kind of disappointed by the mystery. The mystery was a little odd because the perpetrator, we know who did it pretty immediately. So the bad guy is revealed very early. And the rest of the book was just spent with characters kind of like insisting nothing bad is happening or completely overreacting to the bad things happening and blaming it on this Whitaker and all of those things. And the love story, I didn't see as much of a love story in it as the back implies either. So I really liked the history. I really liked the description of place and time. I didn't love the story that kind of brought it along. So who should read it? Well, I would say if you're interested in early American history, pre-revolution, Dutch culture, if you're interested in that, it was really, really interesting. There were lots of compelling descriptions of Dutch society, and some of the descriptions of them, the characteristics of these people, are used still today to talk about stereotypically Dutch people, and that is, they're very frugal and they're very industrious, and so you see that in the culture in these books. I don't know if it's stereotyped or not. If you like mysteries, you could put this one on your list. It's different because it's not that big reveal in the end. We know who did it all the way through, and the action is sort of along the sides of that. So it's a little bit different than a typical mystery. I think that, unless you have an interest in that time period or that location, that type of culture, you may not stay involved in the mystery just because, again, we already know who did it just pretty quickly. I really wouldn't call it a love story. If you're in this for the love story, I don't think you're going to get what you want out of it. There's a lot of romance, or there's a little romance. There's a lot of sexual tension in here, though. So if you like that sort of like cliffhanger episode thing where the two characters are like constantly almost getting together, but not, you might enjoy it for sure. It has that in spades. Who should not read it? It's odd because it's a pretty light novel, but it is kind of an adult novel. There's a little bit of sex, there's a little bit of swearing, but that's, not super bad. What's actually most disturbing is the content associated with death and dying. And that includes some fairly graphic descriptions of things like disbowelment and cannibalism and human dismemberment. And you have to then remember that this is about children being abducted. And so these victims, many of them are children. So it's a bit disturbing in that respect. There's also a lot of injustice that happens throughout the book, and I'm not a fan of that. Like when somebody does something bad, but they get away with it for whatever reason because of who they are, or whatever, and that bothers me. And there was quite a bit of that in there too, along with sort of other people getting blamed for things that they weren't doing. And I think that part of the violence that is most bothersome is that it seems like it's there more for shock value than to really advance the plot along. So it's sort of gratuitous, I guess. And if that's not your thing, then you might want to steer clear. Like even the bad guy and it's the punishment the bad guy gets, which you expect, but it's still a pretty disturbing punishment. Like you wouldn't normally want to think about something like that. So I think the bottom line on this is it tries to be too many things, but it's got a lot of different things to offer people. So, you can like the bit of the love story, sexual tension bit, you can like the mystery bit, you can like the time period, the setting, the Dutch culture. There's so many things that you could grab onto that are throughout the book, so the rest of it you can stay interested in. I would really like to get her second book, which, let me see if I can find it. It's called Savage Girl. Because I'd like to see if it's similar, or if the story's a bit more streamlined, or how that works. So I would like to read another one of hers if I can ever shorten my to be read list. So that is The Orphan Master by Jean Zimmerman. I will again link the About Zebra Reads page in the description. I'll put some links to where you can find this book if you're interested in it. And then also, always check out your local library or whatever, see what they have. So I hope you enjoyed this. We will be back next week talking about Season Z, Episode 4, which is Gabrielle Zevins, The Storied Life of A.J. Ferkey, I think. So I'll see you then.